So good morning, everyone, and welcome to our third webinar in the webinar series, Insights into Question 1, Tourism Excellence for the RACV Victorian Tourism Awards. I'd like to introduce you all to our co-presenter today, Stuart Topless from Victorian State Government, the Tourism Events and Visitor Economy branch. Welcome, Stuart.
Thanks, Chris. Great to be here.
And so this workshop that we're going into today is all around question 1. So we're going to dive deep into each of the individual parts of the Tourism Awards submission for question 1, which is all around tourism excellence. And so who better not to help us out than one of our esteemed judges in Stuart. Stuart, just tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're from and your involvement in the awards over the years.
Oh, thanks, Chris. Yes, I've been involved in awards for probably over 15 years now, either as an awards judge or a mentor, and I work for, as you said, the Department of Jobs, Precincts and Regions in the tourism area. I find being an awards judge such a rewarding experience, meeting some fantastic people, getting to read submissions around some fantastic product we have across Victoria. So it's great to be involved and looking forward to being involved again this year.
How many years have you been involved for now?
Oh, too many, Chris, would be the brutal, honest response, but no, probably about 15 years on and off that I've been involved with the Tourism Awards.
Great. And what about as a judge? I thought it'd be worthwhile before we get into looking at the question 1 into tourism excellence. Tell us a little bit about the judging process and what's involved with the judging process from the judge's perspective.
Okay, so essentially there's roughly around 30 judges are selected to judge the submissions and the site visits. We're selected on the basis of our knowledge and experience, particularly in the tourism industry. A few of us are also specialists in a particular area. For example, area I have a fair bit of work experience in is sustainability and crisis management. We also have former winners of the Tourism Awards, so they provide a fantastic further insight into the judging process as well. So normally the process is that we'll come together as a group of 3 judges to assess a number of submissions. Normally that's around about 15, Chris, I think, from last year, across about 3 or 4 categories. We individually read the submissions, and then we come together to confer on the scoring, where we have a discussion whether there's any variances in how we've assessed the submission. What else could it is? I suppose what we're looking at is scoring the submissions out of 100 points. In most cases, you can really interrupt me if I get this all wrong, Chris, but and then 20 points where there's a site visit involved. Not every category has a site visit. So that's essentially it. I suppose the other key point around the judging process is that we are volunteers. We don't get paid to be judges. We tend to be reading submissions and in the evening, and hours, just like yourselves in terms of preparing submissions, we'll be reading the submissions of that period of time. So important to note that you've got to grab our attention from the beginning, and that's what we'll talk about at the moment, particularly around question 1 and how you can do that. So I think that's probably.
Yeah, I think the important thing with the judging process is that the judges actually do give every submission due credit and due time to actually read over them. They, a lot of the submissions they'll take sometimes 2 hours to 3 hours to actually read through and score each of the individual submissions. So as you can appreciate, as a group of volunteers, they're reading these submissions, and so making your submission stand out from the pack is critical, especially when they're having to read 10 to 15 of those submissions at differing times of the day. So it's a very robust process that the judges have to go through to ensure that the right result is achieved. So yeah, there are some great opportunities for the judges, and we'll get some tips from Stuart throughout this morning's session.
Maybe the only other point to make, Chris, is that we do provide feedback on every question to help you in terms of, particularly if you're wanting to refine your submission for next year. It's important to take that feedback on board, and we do provide a very extensive amount of written feedback these days compared to maybe 15 years ago when I first started judging.
And that's it's a nice way of getting a bit of that insights as well to how you can actually improve your submission year on year from the judges, but also understanding that as well, that the judges actually look at things from different perspectives as well. So, you know, judges come in with different backgrounds, different experiences with the awards program, and so, you know, sometimes, as Stuart said, we do have some experts in certain areas. You know, they might have different insights into other judges. So look at your feedback as a collective in terms of how you can actually improve your submission year on year. If you do have any questions throughout this morning's webinar, feel free to jump into the question box that is there and ask those questions as we do go through, and we'll answer those questions as they pop up. Just going to push across. For some reason that didn't work. Sorry guys, just trying to move our slide across, but it's not moving. There we go, that worked. So just look quickly, I'll just show you again. I'm not sure who's been viewed any of our other webinars, but there has been a slight change from an experienced entrance perspective in terms of how the portal looks this year. So in the past, as soon as you logged into the Tourism Awards section through the portal, you landed on your awards submission. This year, because they've implemented the new business standards and the accommodation standards, you'll see that those are now broken up across the top of the portal there. So to go into your submission, you basically click on the awards submission tab at the top there, and that effectively will take you straight through into your awards submission. And so navigating as per last year, down the bottom of the page, you will see you've got your different areas there in terms of the different question sets. So, you know, tourism excellence is the one we're looking at today. Be mindful though that you can jump in and out of these. It saves for you, so you don't necessarily need to go in and actually answer it all at once. It will save, and you can jump around between the sections as you please. So remember that when you are completing your submission. But we're going to dive straight in now to the questions. The questions that we're showing, just be mindful that this is from one particular category. There are slight variations between the categories with the questions. I think we're looking at today has up to Part D, so it has 4 parts to it. Some of the questions only have up to Part C, and then with destination marketing, it is a slightly different question set throughout. So just be mindful of that when you are actually viewing this webinar and you know, doing your questions. Take what's written within the portal as gospel, not what we've got written here, as this is a bit of a collective overview of all of the categories that we have. So question 1 really looks at, you know, tourism excellence within your business. Now, question 1A, as it says here, demonstrate your eligibility for this category related to the category descriptor and provide a brief overview on the nature and history of the business. So this is really the time in your submission where you can really highlight or talk about your business. I think it's probably one of the easier parts of the question, Stuart, you'd agree, to actually answer.
Yeah, this provides a great opportunity to showcase your business, grab our attention, give us a really great insight into your business, what you offer, but also, you know, the history behind your business. You know, what started all, what was the driver behind why we are now, where some of the successes have been, some of the challenges that have been facing your business. Yeah, it's probably a bit of a warts and all, but you know, obviously want to keep it as positive you can. But if there's been some challenges, it's great to hear that. It's about telling us a story about your business since it's been established.
It's probably 5 things you really need to consider when answering this question as well. You know, what the judges want to see is make sure that you're eligible for this category. So some of the categories can be quite specific, whether it be around, you know, food tourism, making sure that you're talking exclusively about your food tourism experience, or whether you're entering one of the major or minor tourist attractions or tour and transport operators, making sure that you meet the eligibility criteria there. So make sure you read the criteria for the different categories to make sure that you are actually entering a category that is best suited to your business, and make sure you reflect that within your answer, because that's what's actually they're going to be looking for in there. As Stuart said, talk about nature and history of your business. You know, important is where your business is located. Judges will want to get a sense of where you are and where you're placed. Now, at the state level, you know, most judges will be, you know, fairly familiar with, you know, a majority of towns or larger towns within Victoria anyway. But what you need to do is actually make sure you're answering this question for someone who maybe never been to Victoria, because if you're lucky enough to win at the state level, your submission will go automatically up to the national level, and so you'll have judges from all across Australia reading your submission. So really focus on that when you are actually answering this question. So you need to highlight exactly where you are in not just in Victoria, but where that is in relation to Australia as well, so they can get that national perspective on it also. You know, who's the workforce behind the business, important, and then as Stuart said, you know, a bit of a history, an overview of the history of your business. Now, when did it first start? Who's employed in the business? Is it a family business? How many full-time employees and things you have like that? So really get in there and actually talk about what your business is. I do have a couple of examples that we can show you as well, and a big shout out to our friends at Cave Hill Creek, who have kindly allowed us to show their winning submission last year. Cave Hill Creek won Hall of Fame at the state level last year, and then we're also lucky enough to win at the national level in the standard accommodation category. So congratulations to those guys. But just want to sort of show you a bit of how they've laid it out. Imagery is super important. You're only allowed 25 images within your submission, so be careful of where and why you use imagery. Just don't use images as fillers. You know, use images that actually really help to back up what you're saying within your submission. So you know, these guys have laid it out here in this way, and then you know, they've also included, you know, a picture of the family-run business. You know, and they've also included the map there, which actually shows, you know, where they're located in relation to Melbourne, where they're located in the state, and where obviously the state is in Australia as well. So, you know, make sure you're actually really highlighting to people outside of the state, you know, about your location and about your product.
The use of interesting use of the grevillea in as one of the photos used in this submission. Our first response was, why are they putting a photo of a flower? But I can see the context in terms of links across to the logo and what, you know, the experience it's offering within this particular business.
And the great thing as well here with this image that you can see on the screen here, they've actually used an editing tool to actually use these 4 images, and so that actually only counts for 1 image. So you can be creative with how you use images within the awards portal. So you can use a system like Canva or something like that to combine 4 images together, save it as one file, and you can upload that as one file. So very creative way of being able to show a number of different aspects of your business, but only have it accounted for as 1 image. So keep that in mind when you are laying out and taking some time to look at what images you should be using, but also talk about you know, what the images are showing as well. You can put captions to these, which is included outside of your word count. There are 6 words that you're allowed to use per image as part of a caption, which, as said, outside the word count. So be creative. Actually talk about why you're why you've got that image there and what it represents. What you need to be mindful of, though, you shouldn't be including bulk text as part of images. What you really need to be thinking about when judges are reading this, that they need to be able to get the answer from the actual text and not from a table or something else that's being uploaded as an image. So be mindful of that, because the way to think about it is, are you answering the question? And if the image is removed, have you answered the question fully? Because they won't be reading bulk amounts of text within an image, because what that actually does, it actually takes you outside of the word count, and so that can't be judged.
I like this, like the way in which the text is being presented in this particular submission. You know, nice little subheadings. It just brings it together very well, and it has a bit of a personal touch in this as well, in terms of discussion around the kids helping name the business. I mean, that's fantastic. That just adds a greater perspective to the submission.
So moving along, part B of this question, now what tourism products, experiences and services do you offer visitors? So obviously the real focus of this question is your tourism products. Stuart, I know we were chatting a bit before around this before we kicked off the webinar, that a lot of businesses focus on everything else as well as their tourism experiences or products.
Particularly if you're a multifaceted business, for example, a winery that produces wine, what we're interested in is the tourism component of it, the tourism experience that's offers it, not the many wine awards that you've won for the quality of your wines. It's how that then, it may be, but also how that links back to the tourism experience is critical in this response.
So you need to think about all your experiences that you offer as well. So if you're an accommodation provider, you need to think about what your room types are. You might have a varying range of room types. What hotel services do you actually provide? What facilities do you have? And what other experiences are you offering? You might be doing food and wine experiences. You might be doing tours and things like that as part of your overall tourism experience. So think about what you're actually offering from a tourism perspective to your guests. As you can see here as well as we're going through this webinar is the tips that are provided. They're actually, throughout the entire question sets. So make sure you are taking note of those when you are reading them and actually focusing on what they're saying you should be including, because it's pretty critical that if they're there, then the judges are really looking for that as part of their review.
Also, just important in the question, you see in CS6, that's the scores that apply to this particular question. So that's critical when how much time and text you provide and commentary you provide to this particular response is based on the points allocated.
Yeah, so a majority of the submissions are worth 12,500 points, and so you can actually work out from there, based on 100 points throughout the entire submission, you can actually work out roughly, how much time and space in terms of your word count you're actually applying to each of these individual sections. So have a bit of a think about that. If it's a 4-point question or a 3-point question, don't write slabs of information down there, because all you're going to be doing is using up your word count for an area where you're only ever going to be able to score 3 or 4 points. Make sure you allocate your words appropriately. Again, a bit of an example from the guys at Cave Hill Creek, how they've laid out their submission. They've actually done it again in a bit more of a quirky way, I suppose. They've talked about somewhere to stay. They've also then later on they talk about, somewhere to nourish yourself, something to do. So they've laid it out again a bit differently. There are a number of different ways that you can lay out this one. A table is always good to lay out this submission or this part of the question, so you can actually clearly define the different things that you are offering from a tourism perspective, the products and experiences that you are offering. It's also important here, images again are really important to actually show exactly what people are getting themselves in for. They can actually get a sense, the judges can get a sense from this, the different types of accommodation that are available. Stuart, it's probably important in this question as well to include pricing and things like that.
Yeah, it just provides an overview, particularly as it leads into other questions within the submission. A lot of the questions, particularly in the tourism excellence response, will then cross-reference across to the marketing response area. We'll be seeing where you've linked everything across the submission, and that includes particularly even reference to target audiences and target markets, which this particular submission does very initially, but then you go, okay, that's good. Let's find out a bit more detail later in the response under marketing.
No, it's fantastic.
I would suggest also in this, that particularly under this question, as Chris has already highlighted, the use of imagery is important. It's probably, of all of the questions, this is critical, because you're probably less likely to have testimonials and evidence in this particular response, which you'll hopefully be providing in other questions later in your submission.
And just on testimonials and displaying of testimonials and that kind of backup or evidence, I suppose. How is the best way to present that? Is it just putting a quote in? Is it screenshots of quotes and things?
It varies depending on the type of business, but people these days tend to include a screenshot of a TripAdvisor response, for example, or from some other social media. Others have got a quote from a stakeholder that's important to their business, and they've just put it in italics, acknowledging who the quote was from. It depends on particularly the businesses.
Yeah, fantastic. So part C is, Stuart and I were talking about this beforehand. It's probably one of the more challenging questions for an entrant to really wrap their head around it, but describing your commitment to tourism excellence. So the tip here says, explain your values, your philosophy and commitment to excellence, and what makes you stand out. This may include, but not limited to, accreditation and recognition in award programs. Stuart, I suppose, what have you seen that businesses have done here, or what sort of advice can you give for this question, because it can trip people up occasionally?
Yeah, as you said, it is one of the more challenging ones. Probably this one and sustainability, the two questions that submissions struggle in. In this case, what we're really looking for is maybe a definition in the very first few words about what you think excellence is and how that applies to your business. A number of entrants have used the definition that was developed as part of the previous Tourism Victoria Tourism Excellence Program that defined what excellence meant. But some businesses, completely done. It doesn't have to be the academic exercise, but really, highlight the commitment to continuous improvement in their business is clearly what this question is asking for.
Yeah, and it needs to be applied across a range of your business practices. So, think about, how do you show excellence within your product? How do you show excellence within your customer service? How are you showing excellence within your marketing or your staff training or your environmental practices? So, use the question sets or the categories or the questions throughout to sort of use that as a bit of a guide to, showing excellence across the rest of the submission, because this, as I said, this question one is really setting the scene. So you sort of got the questions coming up later on around business planning and marketing and your professional development and staff, and then also on your customer service and sustainability. So, look at those key areas of your business and where are you showing excellence in those areas, and then how you are showing it. So think about the accreditation programs you're involved with. What other training programs have you done to ensure that, everyone around you is exhibiting excellence?
And even if you've won an award in the past year or two, put that in there. That's definitely
local awards,
a clear sign. Awards. Yeah, local awards, whether they're business excellence awards, sustainability awards. It just demonstrates your excellence, as Chris said, in those key areas. Because what we'll be looking at, this is, as we said, the scene setting question. Are we then looking for a more detailed response later in the submission around those key areas like marketing, sustainability, staff training, for example?
Final part to this question is part D, describing your involvement in the tourism industry. So explain how you have been actively involved with and contributed to the tourism industry. Think locally, regionally, nationally, and if your business is internationally, how you do that internationally. Do you got any examples of how businesses could be involved within the industry at a local level or regional level?
Oh, look, examples are being on the committee of the local traders group or local tourism association. Obviously, being a president of the local tourism association is probably more highly regarded, but it's also importantly how you demonstrate how your businesses benefit from this particular involvement, but also how the regional, the local, or the national tourism industries benefited from your involvement in the industry. So, as I said, people tend to scale it up. Usually in a table is usually how this is generally presented. That would assist the judge in terms of making an assessment on this particular
and it's really looking
question.
at how your business fits within the wider industry, within the wider destination, and your commitment and things to that. So
it's more than just being an advertiser in official visitor guide of the Regional Tourism Board, for example. That's probably more something we'd be looking for in your marketing questions rather than in your involvement in the tourism industry. This is really looking at what you're putting back into the tourism industry.
And here's a bit of an example that, again, from Cave Hill Creek, how they've laid out this question. They've got it across the 4 different levels, and it's quite clear from a judge's perspective to look at this and go, yep, I can see clearly where they're involved across, regional, state, national, international level. It talks about how they're involved, and then it also talks about, the benefit and what they actually give to that and who's actually involved. So from a judging perspective, that's a really nice and easy way, a very quick sentence at the start to sort of set the scene, and then really just dive into answering the question holus bolus.
Absolutely, yeah. Clear, succinct, clear highlights what that involvement is. Whether it's just a member, but a member versus being on the committee, for example.
Yeah, and think again holistically across your whole business. It might not be yourselves as owners or whatnot. It might be someone within your team who's involved in a particular facet that they do that for on behalf of your business. So think across the entire organisation in terms of how they're involved in different aspects of in terms of different aspects of the business. And we're talking a bit about it earlier as well. From an international perspective, you could be working collaboratively with operators in your area, packaging it up, and then going, taking that product, 4 or 5 product overseas. So the benefits back to industry is, you're representing your entire 4 or 5 products. There's cost savings involved with that as well. So
and usually under the banner of the region where you come from, where your business is based.
Yeah. So that's a bit of the insights into question 1 this morning. If you do have any questions or anything that's burning out of that, please jump into the question box there and ask those questions. As it's not every day you get an opportunity to ask questions complete from the judges who will be reading these submissions. So if there's anything that you're wanting to know a bit more about, please do jump in and ask those questions. But just to continue to wrap up some of our entrant support and things that we do have on the go at the moment. So just to remember that we are running this full webinar series for you to get involved with. As sort of said, they're really aimed at being quite small snapshots of, diving a bit deeper into the particular parts of the submission. So next week we're going to be joined by one of our project officers, Anna Heaton, who has written winning submissions before, and now is actually the project officer for the Geelong and Ballerine tourism region. So make sure you tune in next week as we dive a bit deeper into the business planning question. Again, quite a critical question, the business planning question, as it really sets the crux again for the entire submission. So stay tuned for that one next week on the 23rd. As also mentioned, we are running our business excellence workshop with a twist. We had our first one yesterday down at Torquay, which was a fantastic success. So have a look at those that are coming up in your region. Hopefully you can get across to one of those workshops in the coming weeks. And the other support that's available to you as well is project office support for first-time entrants. So for those of you who haven't tuned in before, there is a program running for first-time entrants in relation to assisting you get involved in the awards program. So speak to your regional tourism boards. And we also have the mentor program, which is there for experienced entrants. So if you are an experienced entrant, you just want a bit of support with your submission, we do have the mentor program. Again, we've got a panel of mentors that are, past judges, past entrants who really can assist you with completing your submission. We do have a question come through. I'm just going to lean over and have a quick. Are those workshops recorded? Unfortunately, we haven't recorded one. We might look at recording one of those later in the season, but the Tourism Awards component of that workshop is actually probably covered in more detail in webinar 1. So go through and check out webinar 1, and that will really give you that high level, why to enter and things like that we are covering off at those workshops. There is a part of the workshop that we are running that we can't record at the moment because the information that is being spoken about is under embargo until June, and this is the research that Denise from Stuart's department and team has been working on with Deloitte, which is all around tech disruption. First work session yesterday was great. So unfortunately we can't record it because it actually hasn't been officially released yet, but yeah, there will be an opportunity at the workshops. That information will be coming out hopefully later in June, but then there's also a segment on the Victorian Tourism Conference this year in July. So there are opportunities to pick up those other bits of information and things like that. Another question, is that another question, or is that just
it's a lovely.
It's a lovely. Thank you, Catherine, for the lovely.
Catherine, lovely.
What was the other thing I was going to touch on as well? Nominations are now open, so make sure you do jump in and nominate your business. It's great to really nominate early because, as we discovered yesterday when I was doing one of my workshops, we found that a business had actually nominated for an incorrect category. They're actually a new tourism business who had started up operation only in the last 12 months. And so the only category they're actually able to enter into is the new tourism business. And we don't want businesses getting too far down the track to actually be in the wrong category. So be mindful of that. Nominate as soon as you possibly can. We can then start working with you around the support services that are available to you and recommending and things like that. So nominate. Submissions are due on the 6th of September. There is plenty of time to get involved and get your submission underway. I think, Stuart, you probably recommend that, businesses should start as soon as possible.
Absolutely, and start with the last questions rather than the first questions, because it tends to be, and there'll be a specific webinar on sustainability, but that tends to be usually most people use as the last part of the submission they write, and that's where people do struggle in that space. So I actually encourage you to do it in reverse.
Yeah, and it's funny because at our workshop yesterday, Roger Grant from Greater Geelong Tourism and the Ballerine said exactly the same thing. He goes, there's nothing worse than from a judge's perspective. By the time they think there's a great submission, they get to question 5 and they've run out of puff, or they just don't know how to answer the question, and it all sort of can fall apart in the one question. So sometimes you work in reverse. It can be better while you've got that full head of steam. But make sure you allow the time, I suppose, and break it down into bite-sized chunks. And you can probably see from what we've gone through today with question 1A, a lot of you will have this information already. So start banging out an answer for it as soon as possible and get it underway, and then you can start actually using those resources that are around you to hopefully create the best submission that you can. And probably one of the other tips that I can give is if you're in a region, you've got another business that's entering the awards and they're entering a different category, use each other, bounce ideas off each other. Once you finish your draft, shoot it across them and vice versa. Use each other as your own mentors, and you'll start picking up different ways of hopefully preparing better submissions and things like that. So get involved, start early. I'd like to, Stu, any other final tips, comments before we wrap up this morning?
From my perspective, I absolutely take up the opportunity to either have a project officer support or a mentor, particularly for previous submissions and entrants. I think accessing the mentor program would be fantastic. It allows you to particularly go through looking at the feedback from the judges and how we can improve based on that feedback. So encourage that. Look, my final points are make sure that the submission is well written. Just pick up on things like, spelling errors or grammar errors. It's just disappointing, particularly if it's a great product that we know, but we're judging on the submission, not the product itself, or the product itself, but it's a submission based. Make sure you've got measurable goals and outcomes throughout your submission. That we've discussed the issue of testimonials as well. Make sure you include testimonials and good use of imagery. So I think at the end of the day, we're looking for passion and flair coming out of the submission. How you do that depends on the nature of product, but look, wish you all the very best if you do enter.
Thanks, Stu, and thanks for your time and input this morning. It's been a really great opportunity to have someone of your experience provide some insights and things like that. Before we do wrap up, and if you do have any questions that do come out of this webinar and you're watching this recorded, always feel free to just get in contact with the VTIC team, with myself. We're more than happy to chat to you one-on-one around any of your questions and concerns you might have around particular areas, categories, questions and things like that. More than happy to take those calls, so get in touch. Also a big shout out again to RACV, Naming Rights Partner, Visit Victoria as our principal partner, and also I can't run these webinars without the fantastic team at WebFirm, who do a fantastic job for us each week. So thank you everyone for checking in this morning. Thanks again, Stuart, for your time, and good luck with completing question 1. Hopefully by the time we get to question 2 next week, you'll have question 1 completed, and we can get underway with question 2. So thanks everyone, have a great day.